Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to go over the third video in the series that I've been doing on lab testing, following up on the trip that I had at the Human Powered Health Lab in Minnesota. So today I'm going to talk through the gait analysis assessment that I did, and not just from here's what my gait looks like, but I actually did the gait analysis to compare the a training shoe that I used, the On Cloud Monster, to the race shoes that I used, the Cloud Boom Echo 3. And so there was a lot of interesting comparisons that I gained out of that I could apply to the training that I'm doing. And then another follow-up test that I did right after the lactate test was I ran at a couple different speeds in the Cloud Monsters and then ran at those same speeds in the Cloud Boom Echo 3s and compared the two, and the findings were actually quite significant. So this is a lot of the exciting things that I found out of the test or out of that trip, and some of the more useful things that I've been able to take back and use not only for my lead up into that marathon, but I'll be able to apply into the training that I do here moving into 2024. So that's where we're going today, so let's get started. So overall, the gait analysis is really just you running on a treadmill and letting everything else do the work for you. You don't really get a lot of instant feedback. You can see yourself on a screen. There's motion capture systems all around you. They actually break it down, and you can see a little stick figure of yourself running alongside you, which is quite interesting. But you don't get a lot of the numbers feedback instantly. You can't process it while you're running at 5-minute mile pace. So that all comes after the fact. So it's really just kind of get on and go through the motions and then assess the data afterwards. And the data that you get back is actually quite complex. And again, like has been the theme of all the videos that I've done so far on this trip, is it's really helpful to have a knowledgeable practitioner to be able to go through and help make logical sense and help make meaning out of all these numbers. There's no point in doing a test unless you can use it and apply that information to future training, or some use it in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, that's definitely an essential part of this one, especially because it's numbers that you're not used to seeing. There's also an AI system that they can run through, and it'll make recommendations based on all the numbers that it's seeing and the video that it's capturing. And you may or may not agree with those numbers, but it's at least a talking point or another bit of data to use in your decision-making process. So here's the report that I got back from the gait analysis. As you can see, I did multiple different speeds. When it says trainers, I was in the Cloud Monsters. When it says flats, I was in the flats. And unfortunately, just the way that the PDF comes out, you can't kind of scroll side to side. So I did the best I could to kind of just demonstrate. So you get most of the information. You don't see the 15 kilometers an hour on this one. You would be able to see that if you went into the web version, but yeah, this is what we're using for now. Overall, it gives you kind of a profile of who you are. My primary profile was a power racer. My secondary was a long strider, and one of the recommendations that, of course, shocker, that the AI generated tool made was to shorten the stride. And if I shorten this, the suggestion was by shortening the stride, I'll reduce the braking force that I'm putting with each step. So there'd be less eccentric load and a little bit more of an efficient toe off. Obviously, that's something that I've heard over and over and over before. But if you watch the actual stick figure that I referenced before, you can see kind of the elastic recoil that is essentially free. There's no muscle involved. It's harnessing the fascia system that is in that first part of the recovery process of the stride. And so my argument always is, yeah, I might have a little bit more braking surface, but I'm getting this elastic recoil for free. And it was really telling to see that stick figure running alongside of me, and you can actually see when the muscles actually engage in that recovery process. And, I guess geek out a little bit over that, we had some great discussions with Evan, the guy that was kind of running the show in the lab. And then, that carried on into future discussions when we went and presented at a conference together a couple weeks ago. So again, it allowed me to be myself and kind of nerd out over some things and get into some very, very good conversations. And basically the takeaway is yes, the AI is there and it can help guide you, but you still have to take into account your own personal physiology. And that's something that I've known about myself. And we're not inputting any motion or any orthopedic assessment where these are my full range of motions into that system. So it doesn't know that. So it's trying to put you into this ideal box without knowing that extra little piece. So it's a tool, but not to be used as a crutch. Another thing that I found that was quite interesting in this was, a lot of these numbers got more efficient the faster that I went. And I'm actually quite inefficient running at 15 kilometers an hour versus 17 kilometers an hour. And I even get a little bit more efficient by a lot of these measures in, when I went to the 19 kilometers an hour with the stride. So that is something that, again, I've always felt. I've never felt comfortable running. My coaches have always tried to slow me down in the past. I've never felt comfortable running, much slower than the 6:30 pace. At one point in time, it was a 6:20 or a 6:10. It just didn't feel right. And, that is demonstrated again by the fact that my lactate numbers are higher at 9.3 than they are at 10 or at 9.9 or 10.0 or 10.5. So I'm just that much more inefficient. So I actually, the lactate levels go down as I get into my more comfortable or full regular stride. So that was another kind of takeaway that, is something that I've always felt, but not anything that I've been able to quantify before. And being able to see, the different forces that I'm putting out and, a lot of the economy numbers that you're getting back as part of this report, was just really interesting and helpful to, just kind of reaffirm that what I'm sensing as an athlete is actually being demonstrated by the numbers in the lab. I'm not going to go through all of these, different numbers. That would be, a video in and of itself. But, the couple key ones to pay attention to here are the braking force. These numbers are all quite good and don't change a ton throughout the different speeds. The vertical force max is basically how many times your body weight you're pushing off to run at that certain speed. So basically, at 19 kilometers an hour in racing flats, which is about a 5:15, I'm putting 3.2 times my body weight with each step that I'm able to put that force into the ground to propel myself forward. In the trainers at that same speed, I'm only putting 3.0 times that to run that speed. So basically the higher number is better. It's going to bring down the heart rate and things like that as well. And that was, something that was definitely demonstrated when I did the secondary test after the VO2 and the lactate test, where I compared, I wore the mask and I looked at, a 5:15 pace in the trainers versus a 5:15 in the racing flat and compared the numbers. And that was really a very interesting find on that front. You can see here, I tried to break it down actually, thanks to Jared Berg for helping me put this number there, this little bit together. When you compared the respiratory exchange ratio, which I talked about in the last video, that's basically a number that tells you how much carbon or how much carbohydrate you're burning versus how much fat you're burning. So if you get a number that it'll be between 0.70, which would be 100% fat burn, and 1.0, which would be 100% carbohydrate burn, you get a number in between there. So you want to be going faster with a lower RER number. All right. And so when we compare the respiratory exchange ratio that we were getting in the racing flats at 5:15, we're getting, 0.85 versus 0.87 in the training flats, which is about a 3% difference, and that number should probably ring a bell, right? And you'll also notice that there's a 3% drop in heart rate at that same speed in just the shoe difference. Okay. And what the significant finding is, not the fact that, okay, that's 3%, that's, kind of a known number, but what that does to the carbohydrate burn, right? When you extrapolate that out by bringing the respiratory exchange ratio down 3%, you're basically bringing the carbohydrate burn down 16%. I went from burning 215 grams of carbohydrates per hour in the training flats to, at the same speed in the racing flats, only 181. And if you've watched, a lot of the videos that I've done on race nutrition and things like that, you know that, Ironman or endurance racing is managed bankruptcy. And what you're going to go bankrupt on is your ability to replace carbohydrates. So being able to have a lower carbohydrate burn at the same speed is very significant. And this is why we're seeing so many faster run times that are being put out now, because we're able to go faster while burning fewer carbohydrates. So this was probably my most significant finding that I had out of the entire trip to the lab. I think that the numbers, when we broke them all down, seeing a 3% difference in heart rate didn't really surprise anybody in the lab. But when we actually looked at it and noticed that it was a 16% reduction in carbohydrate burn, that is quite significant. So, I can use this information also to help me identify how to adjust my paces when I'm running in the training flats versus the racing flats. If the goal is to, do intervals at race pace, well, now I can look back at the data and say, okay, well, this equivalent is the equivalent from heart rate and caloric expenditure to what it is in the training flats. So I can use the data that I got from the lab to work backwards and set the training speeds, race pace in the race flats versus race pace, adjusted race pace in the training flats. And then I'm also able to compare this data that I have here versus the last test that I did at altitude, which is where I live, and be able to make altitude adjustments as well. So overall, this was a great trip. I learned a ton. I learned a ton that I was able to apply in the final build up to the race itself, but also that I'll be able to use and share with Coach Julie and be able to apply in the training moving forward. So thanks for bearing with me for these 3 videos here. I hope you learned a little bit, and hopefully this makes you antsy to get into the lab yourself and get to experience some of these tests, and maybe it'll kind of guide some of the tests that you do and the questions that you ask while you're there and so on. So that's all I have for this one. We'll see you next time.